Hello and welcome to another episode of Unbottleneck, the podcast where we solve common digital marketing problems. And today with us, we're going to be talking about content marketing with our friend Lee Judge. Actually, Lee Judge, if you were searching for him on Google, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. He's the co-founder and CMO of Content Monster, a marketing content production agency with a focus on video production, remote podcast production, remote live video production, graphic design, and he's also the Global Digital Marketing Manager for Hexagon Geosystems, an official member of the Forbes Agency Council, and is based in Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome, Lee, to the show, and tell us a little bit more about this Lee Judge. Is that your normal name? Is that what your friends call you, like Lee?
That is my official name, but it's not anything anybody calls me. So, I think those who are listening who are in marketing can appreciate the backstory on that. And it's that my first name is actually Alexander, so the A is not made up. But from an SEO standpoint, when I began working on a personal brand, I realized there's a Kansas City cartoonist named Lee Judge who, he owns Google. And if you search for Lee Judge, and so before building my website, before building my personal brand, I decided to go ahead and add the A back in there so that I could actually rank for my own name. So the website is A Lee Judge. My handles are all A Lee Judge. And actually now, if you Google me, you'll see my the first page of the results as well.
Mission accomplished. I
Mission
love it.
accomplished.
I thought it was like a marketing play when someone says, "Hey, what's the A for?" You're like, "Well, awesome," right?
Yeah, well, it's definitely a marketing play. It doesn't go back to the phone book days of AAA,
Uh-huh.
but it goes from being unique enough to Google.
It's an awesome conversation starter too. Sometimes I get asked like, "Yeah, are those two I's in your last name?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah. Doesn't everyone have two I's?" And so we just
That's a
get
good one.
goofy with it, and sometimes we'll say, "How do you pronounce that?" I'm like, "Well, it's kind of like Wiideman, but it's more
Wait
like
a minute.
Wiideman." And so then they start to go, "Okay, I get it. He's got jokes."
Yeah.
All right, I've got a ton of questions for you about content marketing. This is an area that is when we're thinking about digital marketing in general. There's things that we need to do with our website from a technology standpoint. There's things that we need to do off the website with PR and digital PR. And then there's things that we want to do on our website or even contribute to other websites to help grow our brand and build authority. And content marketing can feel like this big fog of, what do I do? What do I write? Do I need an article? Do I need a blog post? Do I need a sales page? How long should the sales page be if I want it to show up in Google? How long should my marketing piece be? Do I need a graphic? Is stock images good? All these questions come up when you start thinking about content marketing. And one in particular that we'll get to is around creating a content calendar. So I can't wait to talk to you about that. But before we get started, you actually said something previously that really kind of got our attention. And could you explain to us the philosophy behind your idea that everyone is content?
Yeah. So I did a couple keynotes, and the keynote, in fact, you might even see that the sign behind me is Be Content.
Mhm.
The keynote was called Be Content. It was basically based on a couple of things. One, that just like any person or any business, you want to be the content that other people consume. So, we're all content junkies nowadays. So the thing is, when you're consuming content, when your prospects are consuming content, whose content are they consuming? You're going to consume someone's. So if your competitor is making more or better content than you, they're going to spend their time reading about your competitor. So if you're that personal brand or you're that company, you need to be the content that others consume. So that's where the be content comes from. And it also comes from a personal experience that I had in a past life. I was a DJ, and as a DJ, you know, when you're the entertainer, you are the content. People come to the venue to consume that content. But I was speaking with another DJ who had a DJ organization or DJ crew who had all the big concert tours. They were DJing with all the biggest artists touring,
Right on.
and I wanted to be a part of this group because I knew that would help me get these worldwide tours. And one of the things he said was, he's like, Judge, that's what he called me, Judge. He says, you're very well known within the industry, inside the business, but you're not known by the fans. So I was actually B2B marketing then. Everybody in the industry knew me, all businesses knew me, but the fans didn't know me. And he says, you have to go ahead and make more noise and toot your own horn more often and be seen more by the people who want to consume your content.
Right.
And even then, it took a couple of years for that to resonate. But what it really came down to is people were consuming other DJs' content, whether it be, their shows or them
Hmm.
on TV or them being on the radio, whatever. They had more content out in the world than I did.
Right.
So, from a personal brand standpoint, that's what I realized. I had to create more content about me. And it doesn't mean, selfishness, like, tooting your horn or bragging about yourself. It
It's
isn't
personal
bragging.
branding. It's all it
It's
is. Yeah.
personal branding. Like Missy Elliott said, I don't brag, I mostly boast.
Yep.
And the difference is bragging is just talking, but boasting is you can back it up. If it's about
Hmm.
something that is really you, that you really do, and you really have accolades or value in that
Right.
space, then it's not bragging. It's just you can boast. You can say, hey, by the way, this is something that you can come to me for, something you can get value from me
You
for.
should, if you're proud
Um,
of something that you did, an accomplishment. Like I keep bragging about the textbook I wrote for Stukin recently. I'm like, I can't believe I wrote a book. It took me a year to do it, and it was like,
yeah,
I keep thinking to myself, am I bragging too much? I'm like, no, I earned the right to boast. I worked hard on that book.
right. And that book speaks for you. The book is the
Yeah,
content, right? You don't
right.
have to go out and say, look what Steve Wiideman wrote. You can say, oh, by the way, here's a book. Or if you want to know about this thing, I have some content to help you understand that. You don't have to say it's good or bad, just have the content. And that's what B content basically is.
I love that. That's such a great, and we've been trying to get even people on our own team, to become a bit of their own influencers and work on their own personal brand. So we've got our creative director looking at everyone's LinkedIn profiles and trying to, kick them up a notch and articulate what they do a little bit more professionally and help them get more recommendations from clients who've had good experiences with them, so that everybody develops a personal brand because that makes our team look better. It's
Yeah.
not something I'm worried about somebody getting so big working for us that they want to go work for someone else. It's I want to help see what their maximum potential is. And if they get so big that they go somewhere else, that's something I'm gonna be proud of. I mean, look what we helped build. I've got so many of those folks that I've worked with over the years where I gave them training and tips and advice and templates, and some have made careers as freelancers or even started their own agencies. And it's such a rewarding feeling because they're going to come back years from now. They're going to give you credit, and they're going to share with other people how amazing you were in helping them get where they are. And there's no better feeling. But I agree. I think if you're working for any company, any group, everybody should be working on their personal brand because it makes the whole group look better. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah, and
Um,
oftentimes companies are afraid to let their employees build a brand.
oh yeah.
But if you look through, say, for example, your LinkedIn feed, you have
Hmm.
two kind of people. You have those who only post company information,
Yep.
and you have those who create content who are being the content. And I much rather, see someone doing something, even if it's around a product, than just someone posting a product post.
Sure.
Those kind of posts don't get much leverage or much run on LinkedIn. The ones where people actually, um, I won't say expose themselves, people who are actually genuine enough to be themselves,
Yeah.
and to show their personality, because people like to connect with people. There's no
Sure.
brand, there's no logo makes you go, wow, I want to know that logo. No,
That's so
people do that.
annoying when you see that. Yeah, I feel like whenever I see somebody just or a company just posting stuff, I'm just like, this isn't a person. I want to know the person who's submitting this. Who's the
Yeah,
social media person who created this? That's who I want to talk to. That's who I want to see. I don't want to see some, like you said. I want to have engagement with a logo. I want to have an engagement with somebody who's actually posting. You know.
yeah. And I live on LinkedIn, so I'll just say right now, if you reach out to connect with me on LinkedIn, and I hope you do, I'll go to your feed. And if it's all company, 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 and no thought of what your opinion is or who you are, I probably won't connect with you.
Interesting. Well, I'm gonna have to have you check out mine later and see what you think. You can totally troll me and you know be as critical as you want because I thrive on that. So please take a look at my LinkedIn and tell me what you think.
Cool. I won't be a
Um,
butt about it, but yeah.
Sweet. Well, hey, could you, just thinking about how organizations need to better understand content marketing. What do you think that they could be doing, and what are some ways that as businesses start to think about what the idea of content marketing is, what might be a better way to approach it for businesses that haven't really given much thought to it?
Well, there's two, I would say two main things that I would advise most companies to do. One would be loosen up a bit, loosen up. I mean, if your content
That
is
doesn't
led
mean do the
by
Harlem Shake with everyone in your company. Please don't. I don't want to see any more of those Harlem Shake videos. I'm done.
no gimmicky challenges, no gimmicky challenges.
Or ice
But
bucket challenges.
when I say loosen up, I mean, let's say for example you have a product, and this
Mhm.
product is, I don't know, say it's a plumbing product. We'll just pick something that's not sexy. We'll say it's a plumbing tool, for example. Um, Too many times companies wait for the budget to hire some big camera crew to make some traditional commercial looking thing to talk about this tool.
Right.
When actuality, what works better is even just someone pulling out their cell phone and capturing a user, a plumber, using the tool as
Mhm.
to say, well, you know what? I used to use these things, but now I've got the situation where I'm trying to fix this thing over here. It's under a cabinet around the corner. I just happen to use this because it works much better for me.
Such a
End of
different
story.
level of authenticity. It doesn't look scripted. It doesn't feel like it was purposefully intended to try to sell somebody. It's just here I am. Here's the thing, and
Yeah.
it's just real. Yeah.
And that's hard because we typically work from the product down or the service down to say, okay, now we have a product. What can we write or create to show off this product? I think you should probably turn it upside down and say, this is who we are. Let's talk about how we help people.
Mhm.
Let's talk about the solutions we provide. Not so much saying we provide ABC solution, but showing the people who are solving a problem.
Mhm.
Talk about them. I used an example on LinkedIn a few months ago where I said, if you're trying to sell kids shoes, for example,
Yeah.
don't create a commercial about kids' shoes. Create a blog article about safe playgrounds, because who cares about safe playgrounds? Mothers do, parents do. Who buys kids' shoes?
Mm.
Parents do. So talk about things that matter to your audience,
Right.
not necessarily even your product. Because once you become a fan of theirs, once they trust you to say, well, I trust them to talk about things that I care about, they
Right.
will naturally gravitate towards your product, as opposed to gravitating away from your commercial or your very thinly veiled piece of content.
Sure. I remember doing something similar with Skechers, and we were trying to introduce search terms that were more around taking care of and maintaining your shoes, like how to get gum off your shoes, how to clean leather shoes, how to clean white shoes. And it was fun because there's thousands of people a month searching for that type of helpful content. It's still aligned with their industry, which is shoes, and you're providing all sorts of really helpful content, for people that have problems, that you can solve. And the hope is, like you said, to build some brand trust. And maybe when they're there, they'll see a pop-up that says, hey, are you interested in learning about future offers, or save 20% if you want to come back and make a purchase, or maybe you can remarket to them, based on their interests, and using Facebook and ad roll and Google ads remarketing until they either make a purchase, or um, subscribe to your loyalty program, or become a connection through a social network, until you move on to the next person. So I think there's so much opportunity there, and people link to that kind of content all the time. Like it's amazing how you can create a how to. Public Storage created 12 different how to videos for things like how to store and move a refrigerator, how to store your car for the winter. Or we took a DeLorean and had some fun with it. And people link to that and they reference it in their own articles. And it's a great way to sort of become a magnet for links, as opposed to that outreach approach of calling and emailing people in hopes that they'll want to link to you. So I agree. I love that idea of content, of solving problems. And an easy way I've seen people do that too is they go to places like Quora and they find topics, and they
Mhm.
see all the questions people have around topics, and they see the ones that have the most engagement, and like, I'm going to create a whole page on this topic. And it's just a great way to sort of data mine for ideas. I also like to use answerthepublic.com, which
Yeah.
gives you tons of questions. And then most of the keyword tools that are out there have a question filter. SEMrush has their magic keyword tool with a questions filter. Conductor Searchlight has a lower and middle and upper funnel filter, and Bright Edge has the data cube with a question filter as well. So there's a million tools out there available to to sort of scrape ideas. I like to organize them by where there's the most search volume. So if there's more people searching for how to move and store your refrigerator than there are for how to store your car, then I'm going to start with that in my content calendar and kind of work my way down.
Steve, I know this is your podcast, so I want to ask you a question.
Sure.
Because I know you know the answer to that. I want your opinion because one of the slickest pieces of content I've seen recently, I've seen a lot of it, and I don't know how I feel about it yet.
Okay.
And it's when a company does a top 10 list
Yeah.
and they're number three or four. They're somewhere in there.
Sure.
And as someone, not being a marketer, Googling for a solution, I often find, okay, well, here's a top 10 list. This is what I've been looking for. I want to know who the
Mhm.
top vendors are for this thing.
Right.
And what I often find is, before I even look up at the web address or look in the fine print to see where it came from, I find that one of the vendors, the vendor who wrote the article, is one of those top 10.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's done well where it's just that the fact that they have a particular feature that others don't. So the article is still very useful, but then you have to wonder, what's their angle and is this authentic marketing? So
Mhm.
what do you think about those
It
kind of
drives me
pieces?
crazy. I think the title of it should be "See How We Stack Up to Other Industry
Much
Platforms." Right? See
better.
how we stack up to. I think that's the more ethical way than trying to clickbait them with a top 10 list, unless it's genuinely just a comparison chart, and even then you should be transparent about it in the titles and descriptions.
Mhm.
Probably the only exception to my recent rants around Google stripping our titles now and using whatever they want to as our title tag would be in a case where you know uh, uh, a platform or a service provider is saying top 10 of this industry, and by the way, I'm going to put myself at number one. I don't know.
Mhm.
I think I would I would feel better from an ethics standpoint if I said see how we stack up to and still get that keyword in there. But
Mhm.
that way, you're being honest and the person knows what to expect. Because like you and I, when we get to that page and we realize, oh, this guy's touting their own stuff, we tend to bounce, we leave, and that long term is going to affect their rankings. Google will see that search behavior and eventually demote the listing. So if you want sustainability, I think being transparent and following better title and description writing practices seems to me like the more appropriate route to go.
Okay.
um,
Good to
Lee,
hear
you
that.
did say in a recent interview that people despise being sold to, but they love entertaining, engaging content. Can you give some examples of how companies can include more entertaining content?
It's all the cliche words we've been hearing over the past 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Authenticity, genuineness, all those things are true. And the reason why we hear them so much is because they're true. So whenever there's a story being told that happens to be true, that touches you, that's definitely more, it resonates a lot more.
Mhm.
We hate advertising. We're bombarded with advertising. Anything that smells at all like advertising, people tend to avoid it.
Yep.
So if you tell me a story and you relate it to me, make me feel like this relates to me or why it even matters to me, and it happens to involve your brand,
Mhm.
that's the route to go. So
Right.
either your content says this is how you do something,
Mhm.
or your content tells a story that makes me feel something. So
I love
I need to
that.
either feel something or learn something. If
I
neither
I
one of those
love.
happen,
Oh,
then
go
I
ahead.
think you're at a loss.
That's amazing. I remember always referring to the "How Web Design Goes to Hell" graphic
Mhm.
on the oatmeal, and it's one of the things I share a lot with students in some of the classes I'm teaching. And what what I use it for is when somebody says you need long form content if you want to get traffic and ranking, and yet this one graphic is just an image. There's zero text on the page other than just the links that are in the footer, right? Yet it ranks for well over 60, 70 different search terms, and that aren't just the brand, or the name of the article, when web design goes to hell. But when I looked at like SEMrush and the search terms that were driving traffic, they were all relatable words that described the article. So, well, not even an article, it was just a graphic, but it was entertaining because it took the user, the visitor, which is normally a graphic designer, through an experience that they can relate to. So when a client says, "Hey, I need a new website design," and this designer says, "Great, here you go," and the customer comes back and goes, "Yeah, let me chime in a bit on your idea,
I've
and then
seen that
by
one.
the end you've got an abomination, right? And it's this
Another one where they
horrible
say,
website with a
make it pop.
galaxy and kittens and
Yeah,
yeah.
make it pop. I need to pop more.
Right, remember that? So I
Yeah, I
I
remember
thought
that.
I thought, you know what, that's such a great example of two things. One, that it's not always about the words you're using on the page because people will describe those words off the page when they're referencing it if it's that good. And great content can rank fine without context. You can have images and just video. I think BuzzFeed did something a while back where they tested just posting a picture of a pickle. That's all it was. There's no context, no words, no title, no nothing. It was just a pickle, and their image showed up in image search, and their article showed up around pickle because it was BuzzFeed, right? And it was interesting and it was weird. But you're right. I think they entertain. And so even with the public storage examples I was talking about before, we actually got a film student who was a comedian, and she was funny, not like die rolling on the floor funny, but just silly goofy funny, and it made you laugh, and it was something I would watch and read because it's entertaining. Progressive did a campaign dress like Flo, and you can now dress up for Halloween like Flo from Progressive. So there's all sorts of creative entertaining ideas, I think, that marketers can come up with that.
And thinking about that
um,
flow thing, you
huh?
just replicated your commercial by the thousands or millions
Oh yeah,
during Halloween. You know,
everyone's walking around now dressed like Flo, right? It's like,
exactly. So if your mindset is how do we get 10,000 flows on the street? What will it
mhm,
cost us? As
yeah.
opposed to let's get creative, have a marketing campaign, and get people to want to do that.
Mhm.
Like my wife wears a Peloton t-shirt. I'm like, would they pay you for that? I mean, do they pay you to go out and advertise for them to give you a free bike or something? No.
No, she had to
She
pay 60, $70 for that shirt.
plus they talked her into keeping a membership,
Uh-huh.
working out to earn the ability to advertise for them.
Mhm.
That's what community does. Community marketing can make people work for the chance, the honor to be able to advertise for you. That's
Right.
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's genius. It totally is. And thinking about how you measure, right? And how we look at content marketing. This is really important, I think, for those bottom line business owners with really tight budgets.
Mhm.
How do you get the greatest ROI from content marketing in your experience?
Well, I always like to divide it between hard metrics and soft
Hmm.
metrics. I'll give you an example with podcasting, for example. We know things like downloads and we know unique downloads and subscribers. Those are the hard metrics that we can readily find charts for.
Right.
But just like any other content marketing, what about the soft ones? In fact, they often matter more. Brand awareness, social media engagement, ratings and reviews, authority, earned media, customer loyalty. These are all things that are very soft metrics, hard to measure,
Yeah, very hard to
but they
measure.
are actually the most important ones.
Right.
Even for my own podcast, I'm sure you experience this too.
Hmm.
I split my podcast up between actual the podcast platforms. If you go to Apple or Google, which
Yep.
is still split up between Apple, Google, Spotify, they're split up. Then you have YouTube, podcasts on YouTube as well.
Hmm.
Then you have the social snippets people listen to that could be up to a minute or two. So my KPI is it being consumed? I don't say, well, I only have so many downloads or streams on, Apple.
Yeah.
That's not my goal. My
It's
goal is
marketing. You're
not to
measuring
say,
impressions. I love it. That's
yeah,
great.
my goal is, yeah, are people consuming the media? Are they learning from it? So I've had people say, I heard this on your podcast,
Hmm.
and I ask them where they heard it from. Either they don't know,
Yep.
or they heard a social snippet. They might have even seen it on YouTube, which none of those numbers pop up in the podcast stats.
Yep.
But if I end up getting business from that or making a good connection, that's all that matters.
Yeah, we're measuring it in HubSpot right now. So when we're doing events, if somebody calls or emails after the fact and it resolves to anything business wise, we're measuring it separately in HubSpot. Or you could use a Google Sheet if it's easier. But one example was we got an email from AMA Houston, the American Marketing Association Houston, and on the 30th, I'm going to be a guest presenter. For one of their class style workshops. So that gets me in front of a pretty wide audience of AMA members in Houston, Texas. And then yesterday, I closed pretty close to a $80,000 contract from somebody who I met through podcasting. Right? They
Mhm.
heard the podcast, and they reached out. In fact, one of them wasn't even a podcast. One was Clubhouse. I was on a Clubhouse. I was invited to speak on Clubhouse, and by the time I'd wrapped up the Clubhouse, our event went from, I think it was a couple hundred people to nearly 1,000 people on this thing. And afterwards, I got tons of people asking me questions and follow-ups, and can I get a free copy of this? I gave away a ton of enrollments. I think we had somewhere close to 150 enrollments that day in our free course, which then is the catalyst to us showing more content and more courses, and eventually maybe even getting them to do a paid course. So
Yeah.
we're
Suppose
building
we
our
were on
audience through that. Yeah.
your own Clubhouse because you had the content. It wasn't even them interacting with the content yet. The
Right.
catalyst was you had the content,
Yep.
you went on Clubhouse and talked about the content,
Uh-huh.
and whether or not they actually interacted with or were a measurable downloader or a streamer of your podcast,
Yep.
the end result was business.
Absolutely. And so it's paid for itself and then some. I do, like a lot of marketers, I invest in working with groups that can get me connected to other folks who run podcasts, and to other organizations that might be interested in a story, or some research that we performed. And the way, like you mentioned, the way I measure it is I put it into the CRM, or into a Google Sheet if it's easier for you. Where did this come from? Oh, it was sourced from this. Well, how much did we invest in it? Well, we spent, I don't know, $20,000 to be on a series of 50 podcasts over the next year. Did we make that back? Well, if that 80K account closed, geez, we made that back and then some, right? We were profitable on it, and then you just continue trying new things and continue to grow. So you mentioned this B2B podcast. In your opinion, aside from this amazing ROI we were just talking about, what are some benefits of having a B2B podcast?
So one of the greatest benefits, first I'll talk about me and then I'll talk about in general. So for me, it's been being able to make some really great connections.
Hmm.
To talk to some. In fact, one of my favorite podcast episodes was I interviewed an author of a book that I'd read several years ago, and I enjoyed the book. The book was very impactful to me, and then I had not anticipated that years later I'd actually be looking for guests on the podcast, and he'd be one of them. So, you
That's
know,
amazing.
being being able to talk to authors.
Hmm.
In fact, I almost went down my bookshelf and just said, you know what, I want to interview them, and them. And I have so many people who I've read first and
Right.
then interviewed. And it wasn't just for my benefit to to meet them, but it was also if I read their book and got value from it, then I know my audience can get value from it too.
I agree.
So, it gave me a chance to ask the questions that I would want to ask the author as I read a book, and also ask the questions that I think my audience would enjoy. So, I think just conveying that knowledge and giving my audience access to the people who we can all agree are important to our industry,
Yeah.
that's the value. If I can bring value to my audience,
Yeah.
then they won't forget that. That'll convey as value coming from me
Exactly.
as
That's
well.
exactly why I got into teaching. I love it.
Yeah,
Um,
so I enjoy bringing the value to them, and then from other businesses, aside from that, I just have an article that's coming out next week about
okay.
account-based podcasting, which is basically creating content specifically for certain accounts or personas of an account, because podcasting allows you to get very specific if you want to. And not only can you invite those executives within those accounts to be on your podcast, you can also, give them snippets of what your podcast was that shows them that you know what you're talking about, and you have a circle of people. Because if you listen to my podcast, it's called The Business of Marketing. In that conversation, I let my guests do most of the talking, but
Mhm.
it's also clear that those who listen that I'm not just interviewing them. I know the topic myself.
Right.
And so it's a
You know
conversation,
the
and
questions to
only
ask.
somebody who knows the topic can ask certain questions. And so I think my audience from watching our business to business podcast will realize that
Mhm.
not only does Lee know this topic that he can help us with, he's also always educating himself by being around other experts. And I think that's one of the best parts of B2B podcasting is showing that you have a circle of people who you have contact with who bring additional knowledge.
I love it. It's so important, and I can't even go into how amazing just having a podcast has been, and like you said, the connections we make, the clients that we've been able to earn from it, the links in some cases that we get when some people curate some of that content. It's been a win, and people love to consume podcasts at the moment. That might go away, in 5 years from now when we're doing things differently. But right now, it's helpful. People are consuming it, so you can take advantage of it. We had another question around measuring, your results from a B2B podcast. I told you I use HubSpot, and you could use a Google Sheet. What are some ways that you use, or some tools that you use to measure the effectiveness of the podcast? Or you the same way, you just sort of put it in like a Google Sheet somewhere?
Well, it depends on the channel. I mean,
Okay.
and I'll admit, not admit, it just is what it is. Measuring podcasts are difficult. It's
Yeah.
almost like measuring conversations at a trade show. You talk to 100 people today. Did it go through your CRM? No. Did the business card get traded? Maybe not. But you don't know which conversation you had that day. But you do know if you didn't go to the conference, that some of that business would not happen.
Yep.
So podcast is sort of like that. You do have things you can measure. Of course, you can measure the hard statistics like downloads and streams and those kind of things.
Emails and phone calls. Yep.
Exactly. But if you're doing it right, you're going to create a lot more content than just that audio portion.
Right.
So for us, yes, we measure the podcast statistics. We also measure the engagement from Hootsuite or from social, right?
Hmm.
We measure our engagement from LinkedIn. We measure all our social channels. So really, you could say it's social measurement. The social engagement measurement is a separate KPI for the podcast, but it's a separate KPI. What is our social
Still a
engagement?
channel. It counts.
Yeah, and then how much from that channel was attributable to the podcast?
Right.
So measure the podcast on every channel that you place it on, and then aggregate that together to see what the true, I guess, ROI for your podcast is.
That's interesting. So we really could, as we're doing our social media. Normally we keep our URLs simple, and for tracking with tracking codes, we just put source Twitter and campaign social. So we could do something with the content UTM attribute to specify podcast, so that we
Mhm.
can track it and measure it separately in terms of traffic from social by looking at our Google Analytics. It's really smartly. If
I'll give you an example of how, and this is going to be an example towards how difficult it can be.
Mhm.
So we had a lead come in yesterday. That lead came in because of a tweet. We,
Okay.
we were tracking the link from Twitter. The lead came in because of a tweet. The tweet was a tweet about a web page. The
Mm.
web page was about a podcast episode. And so the podcast episode was the cause of a page. The page was the cause of a tweet. The tweet was the cause of someone clicking through back to our website and signing up for something.
Right.
How do you measure that? Was it a successful social post? Was it a successful blog page? Was it a successful
Podcast.
podcast?
Uh-huh.
Where does that happen? Bottom line is we got a new lead
Yep.
from our marketing efforts.
Yep.
So it depends on, I had said to, I think it was Christopher Penn a while ago, he's a data scientist. And I had come to the verge of saying, some things in marketing aren't measurable.
Mhm.
And he corrected me. He says, no, everything's measurable. It's just a matter of how much you want to spend to try to gather it all.
That's
So I
true.
think every company has to figure out where's our line.
Yeah.
For us, we're not trying to measure that long track around. That's, four things: the podcast, the page, the tweet, the click, all the way back to HubSpot.
Hmm.
We're not trying to spend all day measuring all of that. All we know is that the podcast, in a roundabout way, got us a new lead. Checkbox success.
Love
If
it.
if your company is bigger and you can afford to do all that measurement, you have to figure out, is it worth it? You
True.
know, we weren't spending millions on Twitter or on HubSpot or on Hootsuite to put it out there, so it wasn't worth it
Mhm.
for us to spend hours measuring that.
Right.
So everything is measurable. You just have to figure out where your line is of how far you want to go to try to find
Yeah. If
out.
you've got a dedicated web data analyst, go for it. If you don't, you probably don't need it.
You don't
You'll
need it.
probably be okay.
Yeah, yeah. If you never see results from anything you do, that may be all you need to know. You know,
I love
if
it.
I never
That's
got inbound traffic from Twitter,
uh
that's all I need to know to stop Twitter or change something.
my question that I've been waiting for, and this is something I've been challenged with, my clients are challenged with. This is this is probably the one of the biggest dilemmas and why businesses don't activate or have an effective content management plan um, is the tools to use. The content calendar in particular. You could do a Google search for content marketing calendar, and there's 100 things available, and most of them are garbage. They're really hard to use or manage. Or if there's a really good one that allows you to schedule posts and manage and plan and optimize, it's going to cost you $20,000 a month because you're big brand playing for this monstrous SaaS system. We've been trying to coach our clients through using things as simple as a Google Calendar and how to optimize a specific Google Calendar created for content marketing, with dates and things that we need to do. Some of them, are using their CRM like HubSpot to schedule things. You mentioned Hootsuite, and Sprout Social is another one. But none of these have really good content planning and content calendars. They just have a scheduling tool and whatever. What are in your experience as a content marketing master? What are some tools that can help build a solid, manageable, predictable content marketing calendar?
So in terms of building a calendar, I'm a bit conflicted in that in terms of what I would tell someone because
See,
it goes against
it's
convention.
a
It's
hard
against
topic, right?
yeah, well, what I'm going to say probably goes against convention, but I would say focus more on creating good content and not on some schedule of when it should go out.
Okay.
People get trapped up in saying, okay, well, we're going to put out a blog article every week, so we need 52 of them. What happens is you end up making 45 bad blog articles because you're stuck
Yeah.
to some
Rushed.
schedule.
Hmm.
So instead of focusing on sticking to some schedule, which it's good to have a schedule, but your content consumers don't know or care what your schedule is. They
Sure.
won't go, oh, you know what? I missed my blog this week that you're supposed to post. Said no one ever, right? So
Well, you do have to align with seasonality, and sometimes national calendar days can be a fun way to stay in the conversations around things people are talking about, seasons and holidays, and things that happen. One of the things I noticed that Meineke Car Care did is every month they had some special um, efforts. Like, hey, this month we're really going to talk about oil changes. Next month we're going to talk about how mufflers and transmissions and so forth work, and the
see,
following
that
month
I
we're going to
get
talk about. So they
because
create
you're
these
talking
these
about things that
monthly
matter
topics.
and you're
Uh-huh.
scheduling them out.
Mhm.
Whenever I get an email that says, hey, it's Labor Day, change your oil before your trip, the timing may make sense because I may
Yeah.
be hitting the road. Makes sense. I'll give them that much. Um, but it's more about I should change my oil, not so much about the holiday. Because when I see
Right.
the holiday flyers come in my mail this week, the physical stuff,
Yeah.
it's going in the garbage because I know it's just like, for example, why do we have a mattress sale on is it Labor Day, Memorial Day? Why?
Yeah.
It's
Every
all
time.
marketing. It's junk.
4th of July
So
sale.
yeah, so I think a Fourth of July or a Memorial Day mattress sale is a good example
Mhm.
of a content calendar fail because you
Okay.
said I have to have content Memorial Day. What will it be about? Well, the same thing we did last week. We had a mattress sale, but this week we're going to call it Memorial Day mattress sale. No. Tell me about why I should get another mattress or tell me about,
Mhm.
well, I don't know what brand it was, which is bad, probably CERT, I don't know. Um, Told us that our mattresses only lasted 8 years and they talked about
Mhm.
all the dead skin that made it heavier.
Yeah.
It's creepy. It's kind of gross, but it's great marketing because now we're all having our heads that 8 years is the time to get rid of a mattress.
Yep.
But that was good marketing because it was based on a thing that affects us, thing that we care about. It
Yeah.
wasn't about some
Fear and
time.
emotion. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fear and emotion. So it wasn't like, oh, it's October. It's time for heavy mattress
Sure.
month. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of. I'm a fan of scheduling things out after you have good content.
Do
So
it with purpose. I love it. I know
my method
IHOP
is
is their
you
National
get 10
Pancake
good
Day.
pieces of content, then you say,
Mhm.
now that we have 10 good pieces of content,
Okay.
let's not blow it in 10 days. Let's
Yeah.
spread it out over 10 months.
I love it. So a couple examples I had mentioned. IHOP has National Pancake Day that they do. They try to align it with the actual National Pancake Day, but that doesn't always work out. And the reason I like it is because they donate, to charity on that day. When you come in and you get your free stack, the money that you spend when you're there on other things, goes to charity, and then they give some money away. And then Applebee's does their Veterans Day, where they basically give a free meal to veterans on Veterans Day, and that's been phenomenal. Me as a veteran, I appreciate that, right? I
Hmm.
don't need the free meal, but I know people who really could, who are veterans, that would, really find value there. So I think it's great when you can, like you mentioned the word storytelling, right? When you can tell a story and have a message and a meaning, and you're not just taking advantage of a holiday as a way to sell, but you're like, hey, this is an opportunity for us to give back, to be different, to provide value, and let's figure out how we can tie it in, you know.
And I think the
So,
difference is the reason why I said my view of content calendar goes against convention is because when you have Pancake Day or a
uh,
day for veterans, that's a marketing calendar. That's an event calendar.
yep,
It's not a content calendar. And I
right.
think that's why we need to distinguish is those two things because you should never make content for a date. You make
Okay.
content for the consumer.
That's interesting. You're completely changing my mind about how I look at content. I love it. Very cool. Well, I have a lightning round of questions. You've been amazing, by the way. So, anything else before I go into my lightning round that you'd like to talk about related to content marketing?
I think that was the best closer there because my first time ever saying it, which was don't don't create content
Oh,
for a
we're
calendar.
gonna splatter this all over the place after that
Yeah,
one.
I had to get
So
that sound bite because
you're gonna be an Instagram really. All right, my
yeah, I
lightning
mean,
round. Who do we follow in content marketing if we want to get better? Obviously you and Content Monster, but who else? Who would you follow that you draw inspiration from that inspires you?
I can't not say Andrew Davis.
Okay.
I say him because him my podcast after interviewing him,
Hmm.
I interviewed others and they all mentioned him. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to start a hashtag the 6 degrees of Andrew Davis.
There you
So
go.
he's
That's
definitely one.
awesome.
Um,
Favorite content marketing book?
known by Mark
No.
Schaefer.
Okay, cool. I don't think I've heard of that one. I know Mark Schaefer though. He had known as okay. I'll check it out. Next one is your favorite online tool for content marketing.
Favorite online tool for content marketing?
Uh-huh.
Ah, that's a tough one.
You said Hootsuite earlier was one that you use. So is
Not my
that
favorite.
your favorite?
I use it. I have to say one that I don't even use as much as I should. I would say Canva.
Okay. Yeah, Canva's awesome. Um, if I wanted to be where you're at in content marketing in 5 years from now, what are some things I need to start doing and some content I should start consuming and some habits I need to start creating?
The habit you start creating is creating content. Just don't
Okay.
worry about how good it is at first. It will get there. Just create content with whatever you have. If it's just your cell phone, start there. Create content. Um, connect with people who create content. And I don't mean ones who do it for fun, just for fun, but those who do it with a purpose, with intent. And then also learn the mechanics. I mean, I'm maybe biased by this, but I definitely, I'm a marketing operations geek. So, I have systems upon systems upon systems.
I'm a
When my
checklist process guy myself. I'm with you.
yeah, when my company was just me, someone thought I was a 50-person company at the time when I was just me. And they asked me why. I said, well, we've got tons of robots, lots of robots, And so I'm a big fan of automation and systems and getting things to be done more effectively with fewer people.
IFTT and yeah, there's Segment and
Yeah.
Zapier. We love to streamline our lives, our digital lives anyway.
Yeah.
So
So
Lee,
automation and tons of content. That's it.
this has been a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot. I know people who are listening are now just wheels are turning on what they want to do with their content marketing plan. They're not creating content on a schedule. They're creating a event calendar, and they're creating content, to be content, which I think is amazing. You're taking clients, I'm assuming, right? Because you talked about how people are finding you. What are some ways if somebody wanted to talk to you about ways that you might be able to help them that they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, well, there's two ways. First is contentmonster.com. That's Monsta, contentmonster.com.
Love it.
We have planned before the pandemic to do as much as we could remotely, not knowing there's a pandemic coming. So we do remote video, remote live video, remote podcast, everything remote, all remote everything. And we managed to do that with studio quality. So contentmonster.com is that. And then also to meet me directly, aleejudge.com for consulting and talking about all the geeky marketing stuff.
And you're all over LinkedIn, so we'll make sure we post your LinkedIn, and I'm gonna hit you up for some constructive criticism on what I'm doing with my LinkedIn too. So it'll be fun.
Definitely. I can't
Lee,
forget the
thank you.
podcast because we're going to be on in a couple of weeks on our podcast,
That's right.
the
Yeah.
business of marketing. And so be sure to check out the business of marketing. Steve will be there. We'll have a different conversation and even better. So check us out there.
Heck yeah. I love it. Well, thanks again. And guys, thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. And Lee, we'll catch you offline. And thanks again for being a guest on our show today.
Thank you.